My name is Isabel. I'm 18 and I'm a final year student at the King's School Canterbury. In this interview series organised by RUSI and NATO, King's School students are interviewing NATO officials to learn more about what NATO does and what it's all about. At RUSI and NATO's Modern Deterrence Conference on Youth and National Security on the 21st of October, we will again be interviewing senior NATO officials. I'm very pleased to be interviewing Ms. Burcu San, the Director of Operations Division at NATO's International Secretariat, about crisis management in the context of NATO's global role. Thank you very much for joining me, Ms. San, and perhaps I can kick off with my first question, which is, what does NATO define as a crisis as opposed to a serious incident, and how does the organisation prepare for future crises?
Thank you, Isabel, for this question. NATO's fundamental and enduring goal, as you know, is to safeguard the freedom and security of all its members. And we have three core tasks through which we achieve this goal: collective defense, crisis management, and cooperative security. But I hope I will not disappoint you when I say that we don't have a set definition of crisis, because we are there to serve our member states, our allies. This is a political military alliance. We have a number of tools at our disposal. The allies know this institution very well, and they know in which circumstances they can draw on this institution. So a crisis would be that the allies in the North Atlantic Council basically would say that NATO should get engaged in resolving an issue and put its tools into use. So we again, it's up to the North Atlantic Council to determine that NATO has a role in managing a certain crisis, and also to define our responses to that crisis. We, as international staff and the NATO command structure, would be developing options for them to consider, and they would choose any number of them or a combination. We prepare through situational awareness, through constant consultations. Allies have constant consultation here in the headquarters amongst themselves, in different committees where they can also draw on expert advice, and of course in the council. And this is a very good way of preparing. As I said, we do option development, we do planning. This is our sort of state-of-the-art tool for addressing any situation. We also do business continuity planning. That's also part of preparedness. So in all these circumstances, what is very key is that we need to be agile. We need to be flexible and adaptable, because the next crisis will not be the same as the last one.
So in relation to the coronavirus pandemic, NATO has been helping lots of member states by sending medical supplies. What lessons do you think that NATO has learned from the coronavirus so far?
This has been quite an unprecedented situation and a crisis for all of us. NATO is not a first responder, but allies again have judged that we have helpful tools to offer in this situation. I think we have learned a number of things. First, we have learned that the threats and challenges that existed pre-COVID have not gone away. So NATO needs to continue to focus on its core business, be it deterrence and defense, continuation of our operations and missions, and also our cooperation activities. Then we have learned, perhaps relearned, that information space is a key battleground, if you like. Disinformation, manipulation of information, propaganda, these are things that we have faced and I've tried to address. Then, again, something that perhaps has been relearned is the utility of the armed forces, because armed forces across the alliance, across the world, in fact, have helped civilian communities. They have offered expertise and engineering, planning, logistics, transportation. So we have learned that the armed forces are a very adaptable workforce that can help in several crises, and not just military ones. And then I think the allies have learned or relearned again the value of NATO as an institution. This is a place where solidarity between the allies is embodied. Even in the depths of the crisis, allies have helped each other. And also the usefulness of NATO's tools. We have the Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center, the NATO Military Command Structure, the NATO Support and Procurement Agency, Strategic Airlift Capability, and Rapid Air Mobility. All of these things, which have been designed for different purposes were able to be put into use in this crisis also. So we have, I think, revalued or learned the value of NATO and the robustness of its tools and the adaptability of its tools.
So sort of continuing from the idea of cooperation, the coronavirus pandemic has also seen certain states try to use the crisis to gain geopolitical advantage and even undermine the security of other states. For instance, Russian medical teams being sent to northern Italy. Is this a concern from your perspective, and how can NATO make sure that such surprises don't happen again?
Isabel, I think Russia or any country sending assistance to any country is not a concern in itself. To the contrary, I think the world needs assistance, states, all the states helping each other. That's not the issue. Also, all nations are free to accept assistance as they see fit. What was a problem in the example you cited was the portrayal of this assistance. And in more general terms, as I said, there's a lot of disinformation, there's a lot of propaganda going on. And one of the notions that has been propagated by Russia, also by China, has been that democracies are incompetent, they cannot deal with such emergencies, and they need, the autocratic states are more effective and that kind of thing, which is, of course, completely false. So that angle, I think, was the more concerning one in the example that you have cited. And NATO, the European Union, other multilateral organizations where democracies come together and work together and effectively address crises, in fact, is one other demonstration that democracies are working well together and they are able to address such crises and such emergencies.
So in terms of potential crises in the future, which are you most concerned about?
In general terms, we remain concerned, of course, about Russia's challenge to the crisis, to the rules-based international order. This is an ongoing concern. There's a risk of escalation or miscalculation. We remain very much concerned about terrorism, that this is a persistent threat to all of us. We are concerned about hybrid threats by state and non-state actors, cyber attacks, disinformation. We are concerned about instability across the Middle East and North Africa. China's activity in the South China Sea, continued investment in European critical infrastructure. These are the kinds of issues that we are looking at. I think also in terms of cross-cutting issues, potential crises, emergencies, we realize, of course, that global warming, for instance, scarcity of resources, impact on the stability of states, especially fragile states. They can cause civil unrest, humanitarian emergencies, even conflict. So these are issues that we keep an eye on.
So you mentioned the hybrid nature of sort of modern threats. In the context of this, how do you see your role evolving?
In the hybrid realm of things, we again have to be aware. So situational awareness is one of the important things. We have a division that looks into intelligence in particular. Also, the command structure has a good intelligence capabilities, especially analysis capabilities. And so this is one of the tracks that we pursue in any kind of threat or challenge, but also hybrid threats and challenges. Again, the consultation here in the North Atlantic Council is invaluable because nations share their own perspectives, what they see. They also can come together to attribute certain things that are difficult to attribute because hybrid by definition is under the radar, is not obvious all the time what is happening. So these information exchanges among the allies is so very important. We have also, of course, committees who look into these issues all the time, especially on cyber. We have important actions ongoing. Also, resilience is a very important part of our response to hybrid threats. Resilience is all hazards, and it can address any type of threat or challenge. And it's really one of the fundamental principles of the alliance, that the allies must, so to say, do their homework, prepare. This is the basis of the Article 3 of the Washington Treaty, that all allies must prepare and must step up their game to be able to withstand any attack, including hybrid attacks. And of course, we have Articles 4 and 5, which one of them calls for political consultations, and Article 5, perhaps the most famous article of the Washington Treaty, calls for collective action if needed. So there's, I think, a reason why Article 3 comes before the other two. So you have to prepare yourself and then also ask for assistance and support from your allies in times of need. All these, I think, enduring principles, enduring tools of NATO are applicable to conventional and unconventional attacks and threats, including hybrid.
So in terms of NATO's sort of modern role and its expected role, how does NATO avoid overlapping during crises? Particularly here, I'm thinking about humanitarian crises, as multiple actors are often involved, the UN and sort of other aid organizations.
So NATO is very much committed to working effectively with other international organizations. We realize that we are one of many in the international community. And we would also very much like to respect each other's mandates and decision-making. And we think all the international organizations have a role to play. But what I would perhaps also say is that overlap is not always undesirable, especially in humanitarian situations. The more help one can get from different organizations, the better. The coordination is, of course, key. And we have a number of working relations with a lot of different international organizations, be it the UN, the European Union, the African Union, and others. In humanitarian terms, our Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center has a robust coordination mechanism that goes to the EU's, their interlocutors in the EU, and also UN OCHA, the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. So I think the recipient state, the nation, is very much in the center of coordination efforts. But we, the international organizations who would be providing humanitarian assistance, also must be mindful of the fact that, especially in times of a crisis, a state should not be overburdened by uncoordinated assistance. So we must make sure to coordinate very well amongst ourselves. For many different organizations, of course, our Secretary General at the highest level is in contact with the Secretary Generals or directors of other organizations. The staffs have good communication and cooperation procedures. And this is how we try to avoid, let's say, unnecessary and unhelpful overlap.
So it seems like our time is coming to a close, but just as a final question, William Gibson said that the future is already here, that it's just not evenly distributed. And the world is becoming more complex and more volatile. And the only certainty about the future is its inherent uncertainty. How then does NATO prepare for this? In essence, how can NATO mitigate risk politically and militarily?
That's a great quote. I think we have to have an all hazards approach. It doesn't that much perhaps matter if a crisis is man-made or if it is technological or a disaster by nature, but we need to be prepared. And it's, as I said before, it's very difficult what the next crisis will be. So it is really not possible to predict the future, quite frankly. So agility, flexibility, adaptability is so very important. And I would say planning is everything. That's another quote from President Eisenhower, who happened to be the first Allied Supreme Commander as well. So that's actually what we do here best. NATO is I think, a planning organization par excellence. And planning, as much as the plans themselves may or may not fit the situation, the planning that you do in order to get to those plans and evaluate the threats and evaluate the tools at your disposal. And all the coordination that you do with the nations, with other international organizations in putting together the plans, that's the preparation that is key to face the future.
So in the event of the next crisis, do you think that NATO will be ready to act?
I'm absolutely sure, because we have always been ready to act. If you look at our history, we have successfully managed a number of crises during the Cold War, a lot of different crises also since the end of the Cold War. And nations who are members of the alliance have time and again turned to the alliance to help them resolve situations and crises. So yes.
So thank you very much, Ms. Shan, for your time, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.